Naomi, come to the hospital right now. My husband has collapsed. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was my mother-in-law's desperate voice telling me to come to the hospital immediately. What? Okay. I'll head there right away. I quickly grabbed my husband and we got in a car. While driving, my husband, who was sitting in the passenger seat, was giggling and exhaling a smile of alcohol. I couldn't help but wonder, why is he laughing in such a serious situation? As I drove, my husband continued to mutter strange things. Yeah, right. So Dad collapsed. He must have taken what I gave him. Good. Everything is going as planned. I felt my blood draining from my face. My heart was pounding in my chest. The only sound in the car was my husband's unsettling laughter. Now, I can become the president of the company. When he said that word, I changed the destination and made a sharp turn. My name is Naomi. It's been 3 years since I married my husband Steve, and we live alone without children. We do want children eventually, but for now, we've decided to focus on work after discussing it together. This is because Steve's father was the president of a printing company, which, although not a large corporation, was a well-known company in our local area. They handle a wide range of work, from corporate flyers to official government documents to web design. You can always see their work around town. Steve, being the only son and heir, quit his previous job and learned the business from his father after we got married. I also wanted to contribute, so I started working with Steve and my in-laws. We agreed not to have children yet, so we could concentrate on work, as there was still so much to learn. Although there were many things I didn't know as a beginner, the job was rewarding and fun every day. My father-in-law was a reserved and very strict person, but he was more serious about work than anyone else and was respected by both customers and employees. In contrast, my mother-in-law was a lovely and talkative person who paid attention to every detail and was always cheerful. I admired and loved my in-laws, especially the way they got along so well with each other. It made me imagine that Steve and I could also have a great future together. At first, I thought everything would go smoothly after we got married. However, Steve's attitude towards me changed a little after we were married. Although he had suggested we share the household chores as we both worked, he began to coming home later and later, until I was the only one doing all the housework. Even if he occasionally came home early, he would just play with his phone and not do anything. He used to thank me when I made dinner before we got married, but now he hardly talks during meals. Lately, he has begun coming home late at night more often. When I asked him if something is wrong, he just goes straight to his room without even looking at me. As these days continue, the once happy married life has become a pile of dissatisfaction towards my husband. When I complain about his attitude, he always responds in the same way. I'm a man who will become the CEO in the future. Know your place. At first, I was just surprised by my husband's terrible language. But as it continued, my disgust grew. Naturally, thoughts of divorce crossed my mind many times. But my in-laws were such nice people, and I didn't want to break off my relationship with them through divorce. The employees at my father-in-law's company were also good people, and the work itself was interesting. I thought it was better to put up with some frustration rather than lose all of this by divorcing Steve. One day, an event happened that pushed me to my limit. Late at night, I received a call from my mother-in-law. She was in panic. She said my father-in-law had collapsed, and my mind went blank. I woke up Steve, who was sleeping, and shook him in a panic. "Steve, wake up!" "What's wrong? It's still dark." I told him what my mother-in-law had said, and he yawned lazily. "Your father collapsed. I just got a call from your mom." "Huh? Dad? Can it wait until morning?" "What are you saying? He collapsed." "Oh, okay. Just give me a minute." Steve, who still seems dazed, ignored my words and tried to slip under the covers. My husband, who hadn't come home until late as usual today, must have been out drinking. No matter what I said, he didn't seem to hear me, and only gave me half-hearted replies. So I reluctantly dragged my husband into the car and headed to the hospital. Until we got into the car, he grumbled and complained, looking unhappy. However, once we started driving, the movement of the car seemed to be soothing, and my husband quickly fell asleep in the passenger seat. Even though his own father was in danger, I couldn't help but sigh at Steve's carefree demeanor. How can you sleep so soundly in this situation? To my surprise, he responded to my muttered words. "When I said it was from you, Naomi, Dad was super happy to take it, you know." It was more like a sleep-talking reply than a coherent one. Chuckling in a creepy way, Steve continued speaking. "He never drinks with me, no matter how many times I ask. But once I mentioned your name, he immediately agreed and started getting ready. Isn't it strange? What kind of a father he is? Huh. And he drank so much today. But you know what? With this, I can become the president soon." Steve's words made my blood run cold. Could it be that my husband put something in the drink? What if my father-in-law collapsed because of his doing? As I watched Steve laugh uncontrollably, looking so happy and amused, I felt a chill run down my spine. I could feel my fingers, gripping the steering wheel, growing cold. Panicking, I quickly parked the car and nervously phoned my mother-in-law. After a few rings, I heard my mother-in-law's voice, sounding weaker than usual. "Naomi, glad you called. I'm sorry I panicked earlier. He's all right now. His blood pressure went up a bit, but he's not in any danger. Just to be safe, we're keeping him in the hospital today. Don't worry." "Oh, that's good. I was worried. Just glad he's okay. I'm sorry for causing you trouble." "No, I'm just relieved he's okay now." Hearing my mother-in-law's words, I breathed a sigh of relief. But Steve's words from earlier still bothered me. By the way, there's something I want to ask you." "Oh, what is it? What's wrong?" Glancing at Steve, who had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, I mustered up the courage to ask her the question on my mind. "Did Steve and Dad drink together tonight?" I had a feeling that was half praying for it to be wrong, for it to be denied. But what I got from my mother-in-law was affirmative words. "Yes. Steve came over to our house with wine, saying that you bought it for him. Sorry for the late thank you, Naomi. My husband was very pleased with it." My faint hope collapsed with her words. Gradually, my mind panicked. What should I do? What can I do? My mother-in-law was concerned as I fell silent for a while. Naomi? What's wrong? Nothing. It's just... I told myself that this was the right thing to do. And then I spoke to my mother-in-law. I'm going to the police now. Huh? What? The police? I felt as though my mother-in-law's puzzled voice came from far away, as she had no idea what was going on. I managed to speak through my trembling, as I relayed what Steve had told me to my mother-in-law. What? Steve would never do such a thing. It must be a misunderstanding. Despite my mother-in-law's laughter, I persisted and headed to the police station with Steve. It turned out to be more difficult than I thought. When Steve woke up, he seemed confused at first and was quiet. But when he realized that he had been brought to the police station, he started yelling and causing a commotion, punching and kicking walls and desks while being restrained by the police officers. Shut up! Don't touch me! I don't have any reason to be here. Let me go! Steve shouted, being drunk and out of control. Despite being restrained by the police, he kept shouting. The police officer tried to calm him down. Your wife said you gave your father something dangerous to drink. Can you please explain? Huh? What are you talking about? I didn't give him anything dangerous. The police officer then turned to me and asked me to repeat what Steve had said earlier. Yes? He said that he could become the president of the company right away because of what he gave to his father. Huh? Naomi, I just gave him a bottle of wine. My dad doesn't usually drink, so I offered him some. I just thought, it would be funny if we got a little tipsy and tripped over or something. I was taken aback by Steve's words. So, it was all just a misunderstanding on my part? The police officer was also looking at me with an incredulous expression. I felt both apologetic and embarrassed, and I shrugged my shoulders and looked down. I had dragged Steve to the police station without any evidence. I would apologize to him properly when we got back home. However, I couldn't believe what Steve said next. I thought he had actually fallen and was seriously injured as I planned, But it turned out to be just high blood pressure. What a disappointment. Damn it. Something inside me broke, and my husband began to express his true feelings about his father. His words grew louder and more forceful. He never accepts my invitation and doesn't drink the alcohol I bring. But he happily drinks the wine when I told him it was from my wife. I mean, really, how sick is that? I'm his son, And he's all gooey over his son's wife. It's so disgusting. Steve started to rampage again, screaming. He was immediately subdued by police officers. But his repeated outbursts caused the situation to become uncontrollable. Eventually, it was resolved as a family dispute, and we went home in the early morning. The car ride home was very quiet, with Steve sleeping soundly next to me. While looking at him out of the corner of my eye, I made a decision. I would finally go through with the divorce that I had been thinking about, but unable to decide on until now. I believed that his behavior at the police station was his true nature all along. Living with Steve was no longer possible. We would never be the kind of couple that I had admired in my in-laws. Certainly, my father-in-law had been very good to me and had treated me with care. but that was because I was Steve's wife. I think he made an effort to make me feel at home as part of family, despite not being related by blood. He also worried that working in his company, which was in an unfamiliar industry for me, would be suffocating. Perhaps he was kind to me precisely because I was a stranger. On the other hand, my father-in-law was especially tough on Steve. My husband was originally an only child, and had been raised to become the next president, being pampered by those around him. As a result, Steve was easily conceited and had a tendency to look down on others. Sometimes he would throw a tantrum like a child when things didn't go his way. My father-in-law had reportedly been particularly strict with Steve in order to raise him as the next president. Until Steve became independent, my father-in-law did not show a soft side to him, even rejecting his invitations to socialize outside of work. I had tried to provide support in my own way whenever Steve complained about his father, but it may have had the opposite effect. Steve never noticed my father-in-law's feelings, and instead, it resulted in him harboring resentment. Steve was not only unable to become independent, but also was a person who stayed out late partying and even encouraged his father to drink with the hope that he would get seriously injured. It was just sad that he had become so far removed from the kind of person his father had hoped he would be. I decided to have my father-in-law listen to the recordings I had made of Steve's conversation at the police station. My father-in-law became furious, and Steve ended up not only losing his chance to become the next president, but also losing his job at the company. Steve was essentially disowned by the family. He apologized to his father multiple times, but was not forgiving, and ultimately left the house with tears in his eyes. As for myself, Steve and I divorced, but it became a turning point in my life. I thought that I would no longer have any connection with my in-laws, but unexpectedly, I ended up inheriting the company as per my father-in-law's wish. He had started to seriously consider retirement after his recent health scare. Of course, at first, I hesitated to take on the role of president. However, since Steve was an only child and there was no one else to take over the company, I wanted to repay my in-laws in some small way. Now, although I am inexperienced, I am struggling every day as the president in order to continue the wishes of my in-laws. A few months after the divorce was finalized, my phone suddenly rang. The screen displayed an unexpected name.
Naomi, it's me.
What do you want, Steve? Even though it had been a long time, Steve called my name in a friendly way, which irritated me.
I heard that my dad's company is in your hands now.
It must be tough for you to handle it all alone. Thanks for your concern, but I'm doing just fine.
Well, I know you were putting on a brave face, but
it must be a heavy burden for you. I told you I'm doing just fine. Can I go?
Hey, come on, Naomi.
Listen,
I've been thinking.
Why don't we give it another shot? What are you talking about? There's no way we can start over again. You are the kind of person who would hurt people for selfish desire.
But I've changed now. Please, let's try again.
Enough. I gotta go. Don't call me again. I hung up and immediately set my phone to block his calls. But the story didn't end there. Steve appeared at my office the next day. As I was walking from the company towards the parking lot, while chatting with a new employee after work, Steve and some other men approached us. Steve ran towards me while shouting something loudly. just like when he caused a disturbance at the police station before. It's sad that when you were really scared, you can't move or speak. And that's exactly how it was for me. I was frozen with fear and could only watch as Steve approached me. When he got close, I closed my eyes tightly, thinking it was all over. But then, there was a loud noise as something fell.
Are you okay?
I heard a panicked voice. When I cautiously opened my eyes, the new employee was looking at me with concern.
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you. I'll call the police. Stay here.
He explained the situation to the police on my behalf, as I was still in shock and couldn't do anything. Thanks to him, Steve and the other men were taken away by the police. It turns out that Steve had a grudge against me for rejecting his attempts to get back together and blocked his calls. The idea to ambush me at the company was suggested by his male acquaintances, who he met at a bar where he started hanging out until late at night during our marriage. These men also came up with the plan to get my father-in-law drunk and cause him serious injuries. Perhaps they wanted to enjoy some good times with his expense if Steve became the company president. If the new employee hadn't been there, I shudder to think what would have happened. He still worries about me and has been accompanying me to work. Although I feel a little guilty, I'm more grateful. Maybe I'll treat him to a meal as a thank you. Looking at him, who walks beside me, I picked out a delicious restaurant in my mind.